1868, the Midland Railway built their new station at St Pancras. But the building most of us recognise as St Pancras isn't actually the station at all. In 1873, St Pancras Station was joined by the Midland Grand Hotel next door, built by George Gilbert Scott. Now, the chap who knows about it is Angus Bogue. Hello, Angus, who's managing director. Now, I gather that Scott had built only churches and workhouses before this.
Well, that's right. And he entered the competition for the Midland Hotel, and he decided that what he was going to do was this was his last chance to build a grand Gothic revival building. So he poured every last piece of opulence into this building and very nearly busted the Midland Railway in doing it.
Wonderful. And it is ludicrously over the top, isn't it? What are these columns made of?
These are solid marble, and then you see some gold paint above, and you can see the effort that went into the decoration at the high level of these walls.
Right. Now, what were the problems that stopped it being, you know, the grandest hotel in London for the next century?
Well, it was the grandest hotel in London when it opened, but it had certain issues.
Right.
One was that there were only 8 bathrooms.
8 bathrooms?
For 240 bedrooms.
But that means you'd have to queue for an hour.
Well, you have a bath brought to your room by your servants, and this was the other problem, is that social change meant that people didn't travel with their servants.
Right. Now, what's the grandest thing in the whole building?
Well, the grandest thing in the building is the grand stair, and I think we should go and have a look.
Okay, after you.
Thank you.
The grand staircase has more than 800 steps, and the best bit's at the top. So what were some of the other problems?
There were no lifts, no running water in the rooms, no central heating, and no electricity.
Yes, I guess that would be slightly difficult. Not all the hotel's guests were well behaved. The Australian cricket team of 1930 were particularly troublesome.
They stayed on the 5th floor, apparently, and used it for net practice when the weather was a bit grotty. But they did do a tremendous amount of damage, and were sent a bill for the repairs afterwards.
Good, good.
Just like rock stars.
So this is the top of the grand staircase, and I'm very careful not looking down. It's quite high enough to terrify me. The painting here is quite spectacular, isn't it?
Well, that's right. This is chastity here and temperance over there.
I thought the Australians stayed up here.
Well, they obviously didn't read the signs.
Wonderful, and the whole roof covered with stars.
That's right. And this really is a magnificent piece of painting, and this has been restored fairly recently, as a matter of fact.
You're going to turn this back into a hotel, yes?
That's right. Well, it was a fantastic 5-star hotel, but because of the problems that I mentioned earlier, it closed in 1935, and really, apart from being used very briefly as offices for British Rail, the building's been empty ever since. So after 70 years, we're going to bring it back as a 5-star hotel, probably the best 5-star railway hotel in Europe.
Wonderful. The Midland Railway Company really spent money on this building to make it such an opulent place. And I can't help wondering why. Well, one chap who knows is Roydon Stock. Now, this is a very elegant room, isn't it? Fabulous ceiling.
Yes, a wonderful room, built as the boardroom for the Midland Railway. It overlooks their nearest rival, the Great Northern. And I like to imagine their General Manager, James Joseph Allport, standing up here with a big catapult, trying to smash the windows in. Yes.
But it's funny because that's a really boring building, isn't it? There's no doubt about it.
It's boring but functional, yes.
Yes.
Certainly functional.
Whereas this building is beautiful but dysfunctional. Yes.
Bit of a white elephant in its day, and as Scott said himself, almost too good for its own use.
Now, you said they'd be taking out the windows with a catapult. Was there really a lot of rivalry between different companies?
Yes, there was. After the Great Exhibition of 1851, the Midland Railway realised they needed to build their own line into London. So they really wanted to make an impression here. As well as building a station, they wanted to show off. And they wanted to bring in things from the Midlands. This was to be a showcase for the Midlands as well. The bricks on the outside are from Loughborough, Nottingham. The stonework is Ancaster, Ketton. The tiles on the roof were from Leicestershire, mainly. It's all from the Midlands.
Amazing. Not all of London's stations are quite as grand as St Pancras, but the remarkable thing is that the city has so many mainline stations, 12 in all. Landowners and Parliament tried to keep the railways out of the centre of the city, and so we have an arc of stations in North London from east to west, and the big 3 in the south. Only Charing Cross and Victoria are really in the centre. But all this led to terrible congestion on the roads between all these stations. A solution was desperately needed. I'm sitting here with Christian Woolmer, who has just written the definitive book about the London Underground. Christian, why did London need an underground?
Well, if you imagine London in the mid-Victorian age, it was a very crowded place. The roads were complete chaos. There were carts, there were horses, carriages, probably something like Calcutta is today. And so they really had to kind of think, what can we do about this?
How did they actually build the line?
Well, the early underground railways were built by cut and cover. They basically dug up the streets, put a railway inside and covered it over again. And that was kind of a pretty crude way of doing it, but it was very effective.
Cut and cover was a messy business. Every time a new line was dug, whole neighbourhoods were thrown into disarray. Underneath the roads was a mass of cables, pipes, sewers and all sorts of stuff, which they kept digging up. And then they left piles of dirt and tools all over the roads, and eventually people started to complain. The Metropolitan did make some attempt to compensate them, but only in rich areas. Poor people who were thrown out of slums got nothing when the slums were pulled down. Here in posh Bayswater, where they extended the Metropolitan line, they made an attempt to cover up the mess. And if you look here, there's a very elegant row of houses. If you come along this side, suddenly, look, all the windows are fake. They've been painted over. And if you look at the front door here, there's no handle. There's no letterbox. It's concrete. Messenger boys and postmen, young new postmen, have been sent here ever since to play jokes on them, because there's no house here. It's just a front. And behind it, there's nothing but a railway line. Come and have a look. Here we are. Here's the back of that same bit. Look! A tube line right underneath. There's no house. In the old days, you see, they had to leave a hole to allow all the smoke and steam to come out. Now they don't need the hole, but there's just a gap